everybody, it's Max with Crypto Talk Now. Glad to be here with you guys on this wonderful weekend. Even though I'm not scheduled on the live show, I still love to produce content. So with that said, let's jump into today's outline. Quant, healthcare, AI, big government, and how about this? Changing Web3 for the better good of the future. Is the future now? Let's jump into all of it on today's outline. Here we go. So, like I mentioned before, maybe it was on the live show, I can't remember. Laura Verdian, she's a lot more than just Gilbert Verdian's wife. She is the chief operating officer of the Quant Network. She, of course, right here, as you can see, has a link in bio. But the point is, she has a very robust, impressive background. So she leads Quant's daily operations, strategy, and administration as it goes to market internationally. And guys, let's face it, they are definitely going to market, to say the least. She brings over 20 years of experience in healthcare, life sciences industry, a specialist in the development of global pricing, go-to-market strategies for pharmaceutical companies. She's held senior positions in international leadership. Basically, in a nutshell, she's all of that and then some when it comes to, like it shows here, multi-million-dollar budgets, and especially when it comes to the healthcare industry. So at the end of the day, how does she make an impact, and how does she get the connections done when it comes to other organizations understanding the want and need for interoperability? We're going to get into all that here in a bit. And last but not least, did you know that she holds an MBA from the University of Technology of Sydney and an MSc in Health Economics from London School of Economics and Political Science? As the saying goes, hate to mention Farmers Insurance, even though I am insured by them and we're not sponsored by them. She knows a thing or two, right? Probably because she's seen a thing or two over the last 20 years. Now, what I want to show you is a little bit more from the Quant Network, and you gotta keep in mind, just because the site always looks the same for the most part on the layout, they always constantly have updates. Funny how that works. So she is part of the board of directors. She is a chief operating officer. She brings a lot to the table when it comes to Quant. Now, on this next particular part of the outline, I want to show you this clip. Now, this lady in this clip is not going to necessarily mention Quant, right? Especially with Overledger and so on. But the key thing is this. The key thing is what needs to be solved through interoperability. There's obviously a data problem that we have when it comes to these walled gardens or silos, and especially when it comes to the healthcare industry. I cannot recall the last time that I was able just to go to a particular clinic and just like not even have to fill out that much paperwork, right? How about we get to a time here soon where we don't even need to do that anymore because we have industry standards through interoperability to create much more faster and frictionless problems to be solved at scale that nobody else is doing. Will Quant's Overledger be the one that solves that? I think that's the case, definitely. We're going to play this. We'll be right back here shortly in just a moment.
Interoperability might be something, it doesn't trip off the tongue very easily, does it? It might be something that doesn't really mean very much to people, and in a sense it shouldn't. It's something that needs to sit behind the scenes. But what it's all about is making sure that different systems can talk to each other and exchange data. So a great example that was given by Wilhelm, who was on the panel that I was speaking on, is an example of where he was using digital telephone technology and internet technology to help show his children what his wife was doing while she was in Italy and he was at home in Ireland. And what made that work, him using a combination of mobile phones and FaceTime, etc., was the fact that all of the different telecom systems spoke to each other. So there were different pieces of kit and different providers, but it all worked in an integrated way. And the issue about interoperability in healthcare is exactly the same thing. It's about trying to make sure that all of these things fit together in a seamless way. So if you go and have an x-ray in your local hospital and your blood pressure is taken by a nurse in your GP practice, and maybe you're seeing a dietitian, that all of that data, rather than sitting in different systems and not being able to be brought together, can be brought together. And you've got something that is linked by the patient. And one of the things that we're really interested in terms of the work that we're doing in MedCity and through digitalhealth.london, our programme on digital health, is how can we make sure that new digital technology that's coming in, innovations, particularly from small companies, can be used and really deployed to the benefit of patients. But if we're going to have that happen, we need to make sure that the data that's being produced by those new systems can work alongside data that's being collected elsewhere. And that way, the patient can know that perhaps data that they might be collecting through a Fitbit or an app that is helping them to manage a disease like diabetes, that data can sit alongside data that's held by their GP or their local hospital. And there's that integrated view. So that's really what interoperability is about, is making sure it all works together, it all talks together, and you don't get isolated pockets of information about patients that doesn't come together.
All right, so a little bit more when it comes to the whole concept of interoperability, especially when it comes to healthcare. You know, if you think about it, there is so much bureaucratic nonsense when it comes to healthcare. But at the same time, while we want to respect HIPAA laws and so on, because let's face it, due to compliance, when it comes to just that compliance, wouldn't you want to have somebody who led up compliance in itself with actual standards? Who am I referring to? Gilbert Verdian, of course, of Quant, literally created the ISO TC 307 standards. So the guy basically gets it in a nutshell. He understands the want and need by creating certain standards. And by having standards, that's the path forward when it comes to regulatory framework to put this all together, or we can have everything to be interoperable, in the future when it comes to quant. But when it comes to healthcare in itself, you gotta keep in mind, it is not a one trick pony, if you will. There has to be all sorts of different layers to get things done at scale, because there's a lot of different sectors when it comes to just that, healthcare. Speaking of which, check this out for yourself. We're going to show you guys this clip here in a moment, but it states Quant's Overledger network is the future of healthcare data management. With its agnostic, decentralized data highway, it connects all healthcare systems and securely shares patient data like never before. Like in that clip that you saw, that lady was basically mentioning how, we need to have patient data to be shared, right? There can't be, she basically stated there couldn't be, these little pockets, if you will. Gilbert Verdian basically words it differently. He refers to it as silos or walled gardens. And I couldn't agree more. So say goodbye to data silos and hello to a new era of collaborative care. Let's also play this. Here we go.
So the idea of Overledger was actually sparked when I was working as the Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Health while I was working in Australia at the time. It was here that I saw firsthand the direct advancing of patient care through interoperability. And it was just really better data, and it really came down to something as simple as that. It's because healthcare systems are overly complex and burdened by legacy systems they run on, and some are more than 30 years old, and we still use them today. Patient systems have always been disparate, largely due to fragmentation. These disparate systems are difficult to transform, even more so than financial systems, because of the critical nature and risk to patient lives. Now, with blockchain technology, we actually have an opportunity to change this landscape entirely and transform healthcare. But in order for us to do so, there's really two ways. We would either, one, have all patient records and all health systems centralized in the one place, which is really costly and pretty much unrealistic and impossible. Or we can create a technology that connects critical systems and data by leveraging existing investments and systems without the need to make massive amounts of change. And this is exactly why we created Overledger. So our technology is agnostic. It's an overlay that connects to existing systems and networks and data, creating a kind of a decentralized data superhighway. For the first time, we can actually see end-to-end the healthcare system as a whole.
All right, so since we're still on the topic of healthcare, we're going to get into some of the other topics as well. But look at what's also mentioned here from another great clip from the one and only Quant Papa. And that basically is this. Quant, through Overledger, is going to allow for interconnect big data, AI, government, excuse me, about to sneeze because of my allergies, healthcare, and so on. Now you do see that DAG is tagged here. Why are they tagged here? You got to understand that Constellation had a partnership with Quant. I shouldn't even say had a partnership. They still do have that partnership. And just because we haven't seen necessarily like updates since then, keep in mind they are one powerful partnership when it comes to Quant. In this clip, you're going to hear Gilbert Verdian specifically mention that big data needs blockchain just as much as blockchain needs data. Not necessarily word for word, but two words that basically mean the same thing. You know, I'm sure most of you guys have seen the movie Forrest Gump by this time, right? Unless you've been living under a rock, let's face it. Hate to sound corny with this, but it kind of reminds me of, like, for instance, Forrest Gump. Forrest and Jenny went together like peas and carrots, just as much as big data goes together with, for instance, blockchain. So this key partnership, it's still crucial. Why is it so crucial? Listen to this. Here we go.
We add security to data pipelines or the source of data where it's created. So a lot of what Constellation is focused on is securing streaming data processes. You think about all the data that Twitter produces every second. Well, how do you secure that? How do you put that on a distributed ledger technology? You have to rethink the entire architecture. And so we are building out a network that's hosted by node operators that receive rewards for validating data. We have a very active community, and we've rethought our consensus model so that it's compatible with existing data management stacks.
And you've announced today that you're going to be working with Quant Network, so perhaps you could tell us a bit about that partnership.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So we've been talking for the last few months. We see a great collaboration between the two technologies. What blockchain needs is big data, and what big data needs is blockchain. And by working together, what we've come up with is a way where we can actually decentralize properly, but allow, as Ben was saying, government and enterprise to safely interconnect big data sources to a decentralized world, but have interoperability. Because if you're using, let's just say, imaging data from healthcare in one blockchain, and then using an EMR, that's a traditional database, it's just SQL, and then using something else on a third party, how do you get them to talk to each other? It's quite difficult. And how do you get them to talk together securely? And that's what the partnership is about, is how do we interconnect using a secured channel to the disparate data sources to allow AI and big data to flourish. And we're quite excited with what can happen. And we've got client use cases we're already exploring in government, in aerospace, in healthcare as well, which we've got a couple of RFIs that we've been working on. So we're really looking forward to applying both technologies in real world client engagements.
So at the end of the day, the way I personally look at it is like this. The United States Air Force is not going to partner up with somebody that's not connected, or I should say, has connections all over the world when it comes to, for instance, Quant's Overledger through interoperability. They're not going to waste their time with that. So wouldn't it make sense that other big forms of government would want to get involved with Quant as well? Well, you better believe it. How so? Check this out for yourself. This is the next part of our outline. So this was written all the way back in 2017. It comes from nextplatform.com. It states strong FBI ties for the next generation of what? Quantum computers. Now, understand this. There's such a thing called the quantum financial system. And maybe years ago, maybe 20 plus years ago, if a person mentioned the whole concept of the QFS, the quantum financial system, it might have been looked upon as being like a cuckoo bird, right? The guy's just absolutely a nutty buddy or whatever, right? So here's the thing. It says the United States Department of Energy's drive to place a novel architecture at the heart of one of the future exascale supercomputers and have also explored the range of options that might fall under the novel processing umbrella. But the key thing is they have done just that. They have placed a novel architecture. What is some of this architecture? Well, it's definitely what's tied into the quantum financial system. Right now, as we speak, if you go to Google and you type in the QFS, quantum financial system, and then put in CMC after it, the CMC site, as in the CoinMarketCap site, will give you the top 20 quantum financial system cryptocurrencies. At the top, you're going to see a few, like, for instance, Quant, XRP, XLM, XDC, and so on. But the key thing here is basically like what it mentions, from neuromorphic chips, deep learning PIM based architectures, ultra hybrid machines with a combination of, for instance, GPU and non x86 elements, and of course, quantum computers. There is a rich set of options here. These are important possibilities when it comes to the world's top supercomputing sites, the defense, just like we mentioned with Constellation DAG, and intelligence space is watching keenly as well, and with an eye on systems that can target their exact workloads. What would be one of those systems? Quant's Overledger through interoperability. Keep in mind, if you're a newcomer to all this, Quant's Overledger is a blockchain operating system that is agnostic to the traditional format of needing an extra layer of blockchain to get the job done. Quant Network has also mentioned that their focus is not necessarily on cryptocurrency or the QNT token. Their focus is on Overledger, the actual product slash service. It's very unique. That's why I've referred to it in the past as the Microsoft of crypto. So it says there are, however, 3 problems with all of the above, whether for supercomputing or defense and intelligence. And basically speaking, there are very few system scale products to tie those research architectures. There are very few scale products. What would be a scaled product that basically can do just that? Scale like nobody's business. It's Quant's Overledger. So it states, for all the architectures listed and many more, there are no general purpose applications set. In other words, most novel architectures that have any traction are very good at solving one specific type of problem. Neural networks, fast optimization problems, etc., etc. Third, and somewhat connected, is that mapping problems onto any of these architectures is a steep uphill climb. To the exception, I know you guys maybe get tired of me saying this, the exception is Quant through Overledger. How do we know that? Think about what Gilbert Verdian mentioned, and I advise you to check out any of our previous deep dive videos. It's not financial advice, but it is advice as far as checking out research. And that is when he mentions specifically MDApps, multi-dApps, and why they're so significant. This solves this problem that was listed all the way back in 2017, and that is this quote: mapping problems onto any of these architectures. It's an uphill climb. Understand where we're at now with Quant's Overledger going into Web3. How about this? Devices using higher level interfaces is on the horizon, but for others, especially quantum machines, programming takes some serious muscle. As we progress from 2017 and where we're at now, literally 6 years later, you better believe that we have some of these quantum machines that programs just that, the serious muscle that's needed for some of these workflows. Understand this on top of it. This has mentioned a lot about the whole concept of computers. There's a time in which everybody, let's face it, had spinnable drives with high-end RPM, 7200, Or if you had a Raptor X back in the day, 10,000 RPMs. Then we went from the stage of solid state drives. Why was that so powerful? Because they realized that there was a point in time in which, basically speaking, they took the technology from a flash drive and understood that that technology is going to make access to data flow a lot more faster and efficient than using a spinnable drive. So as we constantly evolve with innovation, Quant's Overledger will keep up with just that. So I want to also show you guys this, and basically speaking, it's, going to make sense in regards to the whole concept of, for instance, security, right? So look what's mentioned here. Security health of any individual computing devices, any of its subcomponents, or an entire network. The company also makes a device called, for instance, DPHY, secure processor, that can identify threat potential and enhances secure processing and storage for sensitive information. This is designed to snap into an existing infrastructure. But most interestingly are the two new offerings, which are little, basically they're not known. First is the quantum energy circuit, and second is the temporal shift computing. The company could not be reached for more information, but the whole point is this. I want to show you, again, back to the DAG example, and that is the head security strategist for temporal defense systems is James Burrell, who was preciously, think about how that's measured, a senior federal government executive in the position of FBI Deputy Assistant Director, and was FBI's point person for the new National Strategy Computing Initiative, which focuses on exascale era future machines. His experience includes serving as lead investigator for complex, high-profile cyber, criminal, and national security investigations, to include attempted presidential assassination, my goodness, assassination of federal officials, and kidnapping of special counsel to the president. The company's chief operations is this particular person, but at the end of the day, why would I mention some of this? Because at the end of the day, what is mentioned here, they use quantum computing and what is tied to that quantum financial system and so on. So just because you hear the term quantum financial system, understand that, when it comes to quant, they're not just focused specifically on one key area. They're focused on many different areas because they cover so many different layers of utility. At the end of the day, when it comes to quant, you have more layers of utility for so many different sectors of the world, it'll make your head spin. That was one of the main reasons why I'm sharing this with you. And last but not least on this page, the combined power of quantum cyber solution will revolutionize secure communications, protect against insider threats, and assist in the identification of cyber adversaries and attack patterns. Constellation DAG, again, I can't stress this enough. If they have high ties to the United States Air Force on a defense contract, you better believe that they're not going to waste their time with the likes of Quant unless they felt as though that this was key and crucial to just that, a defense contract and so on. And we, of course, talked about some of these things in the past. We have a video, I believe, that aired in either November or December, that talks specifically about Quant and that multi-billion-dollar contract through their partner, which is Oracle. Now, some people are going to say, well, that's not Quant, that's Oracle. True. You got to keep in mind that Oracle uses Quant's architecture, or infrastructure, I should say, through interoperability with Quant's Overledger. So are we too far off when it comes to that particular statement? No. And I understand a lot of this that's mentioned here. You may think, well, it's mentioning specifically quantum computers and so on, not necessarily Quant. I get that too. At the end of the day, you have to understand that Quant is at the forefront of the quantum financial system, and that part is true. Let's jump to this next part, and that is this, a little bit more from the whole topic of government and so on. So, did you know that the Justice and Commerce Departments announced the creation of Disruptive Technology Strike Force? Now, this is a little bit more up to date, right? More recent, I should say. This was reported on February 16th of 2023. This joint venture in more than 10 cities will allow enforcement of U.S. laws protecting U.S. advanced technologies from illegal acquisition and use by nation-state adversaries. Why even point this out, you may be wondering? Well, we're going to get into that. So it states specifically here that using real-time intelligence and 21st century data analytics, the Disruptive Technology Strike Force will be bringing together the Justice and Commerce Department's expertise to strike back against adversaries trying to siphon off our most advanced technology and to attack tomorrow's national security threats today. This is another perfect example of, for instance, why Constellation DOGE chooses Quant through Overledger network to get the job done with this. Again, another layer of interoperability. They understand how important it is for that particular partnership. By, like it shows, illegally exporting sensitive technology is not an abstract economic concern. It is a crime with a direct impact on the safety of the American people, said FBI Deputy Director Paul Abate. To be clear, adversaries are directly threatening our national security. These crimes have the potential to destabilize American economic security. Negatively, kind of getting a little hoarse. Negatively, that will impact American businesses and affect employment. The FBI looks forward to amplifying their collective capability to combat the threat through the strike force. Again, you have to understand the technologies that are behind some of this. And what's behind some of this is just that. Some of the key players that work behind the scenes. You better believe that when it comes to Quant's Overledger, they're working behind the scenes. Through what? Maybe officially when it comes to Constellation, right? But you also got to understand that when it comes to the technical attributes of things, there's NDAs that cannot spill the beans on every little thing that they do. But we bring you guys some of this research where you can connect the dots and understand how huge this is when it comes to national security and defense contracts. Now, a little bit more of what we have here. Are you aware that Gilbert Verdian, back, I believe during this time that Constellation came to do the partnership with them, they tested this thing and they called it Kugel. I know, it sounds crazy. But at the end of the day, the significance behind this is this. Think about this for a moment. As we know, Gilbert Verdian has done quite a bit of work alongside with the IETF, which stands for the Internet Engineering Task Force. Now, if you're new to all this, you may not understand who the Internet Engineering Task Force is. Basically, in a nutshell, they are the pioneers of the internet. Since roughly 1985, 1986, in that area, they are the ones who came up with the concept of decentralizing, not the internet, but decentralizing the traditional information structure, if you will, as we knew it at the time. Now, what am I referring to that? Well, if you think about it, back in those days and before the first stages of the internet that went towards mainstream adoption back in the 1990s, if you wanted access to information, well, you could probably find a lot of that at the libraries, but let's face it, when it came to the real juicy stuff of finances and maybe stocks or insider information, I shouldn't even say insider information, but you get the gist of what I'm referring to. You had to be somebody and you had to know somebody, as the saying goes. And on top of that, it was only privileged to, in my opinion, the elites. Now, am I too far off with some of those statements? No, I don't think so. Here's a perfect example. So the 1990s came around, we got more of that widespread adoption, and if anything, personal computers that were popular back in the 1980s were now connected to an actual network. And that network was basically the internet. Hence why they referred to it as Web 1 at that particular time. But at that time, the problem that existed was For instance, if you were using America Online or CompuServe or some other ones, or even if you had, for instance, broadband internet, actually, which would have been technically just DSL at the time, nobody, for the most part, could talk to anybody unless you had, for instance, like the app installed. Like AOL Instant Messenger people could talk to AOL Instant Messenger people who had the same app installed, but there was no interconnections, right? Or I should say, compatibility to talk from one network to the other network. That was the basic problem. In this particular example, you're going to see here, it shows Gilbert Verdin, and he outlines how they were able to put HTTP, as we know, that's like the the main guts, if you will, when it comes to being able to use internet sites and so on. But he was able to put it on what? He was able to put it on blockchain, right? HTTP on blockchain. To me, that is super impressive because it gives you an idea of if they were able to put basic applications, or I should say a basic HTML, Web 1.0, Web 1 on blockchain, can you imagine what Quant's going to be able to do when it comes to doing just that? Putting Web 3 on blockchain. At the end of the day, that is the main goal that they're going to have going forward. So let's check out this example, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Here we go.
We also did something innovative for the time. We put the web on blockchain. And so we actually delivered HTML across multiple blockchains because we wanted to show what's possible. And so you're able to view HTML 1.0, which was the very first version of HTML, running across multiple blockchains through Overledger. And so this was a way to show how distributed networks can interconnect and how you can have the web running on blockchain networks. And so we call this the Internet of Trust. We created a time capsule, and we even created a search engine which we cheekily called Google with the logo because I wanted to talk to Google. And so we did that, but we were able to search different types of blockchains.
All right, so I'm going to elaborate a little bit more when it comes to this whole concept of kind of like what you just saw right there in that video clip. And basically speaking is like this. Think about this for a moment, right? We had to have a protocol that was open without restrictions and embedded in systems which are basically used widely, like for instance, Telnet and Unix, TCP/IP in the early 1980s. Basically speaking, we needed to create a protocol standard through industry collaboration such as RFCs, SMTP, HTTP, and so on, for secure HTTP, etc., etc. A perfect example, I'm sure you guys gone to some websites in which it still says HTTP and it doesn't have the S at the end. The S at the end means, a secure site, and hence why it gives you that disclaimer or that warning that says that site is not secure. So it says there is a good example of adoption of protocols and standards when you look at OCI and TCP/IP, where an open protocol was easier to access, simpler to implement, and widely adopt, starting with the US DOD in 1983, World TCP/IP Day. He, as in Gilbert Verdin, decided the best option was to create a protocol through industry collaboration, and 20 years later, like I mentioned before, the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, was at the right place and approach. Like he says, this thinking is what led to the establishment, like I just shared with you guys earlier, of TC307 or ISO TC307 blockchain ISO standard. So I'm going to jump back and I want to play this for you guys. And it's basically just that. Quant, the Web3 enabler. Here we go.
Are you really just that web technology? Are you that glue? We've talked about that analogy, but you really do seem to be that, in that we all want to see some sort of technology flourish, become that underlying server technology and service. Is that you? Are you the web?
Yeah, we call it the Internet of Trust. So it's the next evolution of the internet, and so we want to be the underlying technology that delivers that across all platforms, across all types of users.
Sure, and so it's already happening.
Yeah.
So it's not going to happen, it's happening now.
Yeah, we've kind of accelerated the release of that. We weren't planning on doing that until 5 years' time, but we had a technological breakthrough, and Colin, the CTO, he just came up with a fast track way to do it over a weekend, and then we put it into the labs and built it, and it worked. So
over a weekend, Gil. I mean, every company right now is trying to do what you've done in over a weekend.
All right. With that said, you can have a Web3 enabler, which sounds great, but at the same time, do you have a true internet of trust? If you do have an internet of trust, then that is going to create what is referred to as the internet of value. At the end of the day, why would anybody use a new protocol standard that simply doesn't make sense compared to the last particular standard, as from going from Web 2 to Web 3? If you have something that is going to create the innovation or standards behind that, what does that necessarily mean? So I know that we're playing a lot of clips for you guys, but check this out straight from Gilbert Viridian when it comes to the real Web3 infrastructure, the real internet value, and most importantly, of course, the internet of trust. Quant, the global infrastructure. Here we go.
The core of what we do is about trust. And so we're bringing trust back into an untrusted world. And if you think about all the things that have been happening with cybersecurity, privacy, data breaches, the fundamental architecture of the internet is flawed. And the reason is it was actually thought of in the 50s. So back then people didn't consider privacy and trust and security when they built all the infrastructure we're using today for the internet. And so we've inherited something that is fundamentally flawed. And it's only with blockchain technology today is what we can actually do to fix that problem, fix the problem of the internet, the original architecture and the way it was made. And what we're doing is we're laying that foundation for the next internet. And we're doing it in a way which is at scale and it's strategic. We're doing it in a piece by piece basis. Every phase is thought of, every step is thought of, and we're doing it to bring that mass adoption to create the next internet, which is what we're calling the internet of trust. But it's basically re-architecting the fundamental systems and the networks that we use, starting with financial services networks, then moving into government, healthcare, manufacturing, supply chain, IoT. So it's really re-architecting the original flaw and creating the next generation of an internet we can all trust.
We describe our work at Quant as laying the foundations with Overledger to build the internet of trust. We are honoring the original vision of the internet by decentralizing it.
Our technology is shaping the next evolution and generation of the internet. What we're doing is replacing the centralized web.
Similar to the way TCP/IP works, we're connecting any blockchain together in a very unique way that is one blockchain to any blockchain without connectors, without any overhead, without any more risk. So we're doing it at internet scale. And we're also allowing people to connect blockchain networks and the whole blockchain world to existing networks through the Overledger.
CBDC DLT networks can be interlinked, and not just with each other all over the world, but also with existing payment systems.
The whole blockchain world to existing networks.
All right, welcome back. We're going to jump now into the ISO TC307 roadmap. Now, many times in some of my deep dives, I talk about ISO TC307, but maybe I haven't actually shown you a proper roadmap. When we think of roadmaps when it comes to cryptocurrency projects and so on, we typically think of, for instance, let's face it, projects that don't have anything to do with ISOs and so on. But for this example, yes, there is a TC307 roadmap. So what does that mean and what does it entail and so on? Well, let's jump into this for just a brief moment. So one of the key things I want to show you guys right here was, this to me sets the standard of giving you an idea of how Overledger comes to basically be what it is today. Now, we have seen demos in the past when it comes to Quant's Overledger, right? Their operating system, their blockchain operating system. But, those are just kind of like quick little snippets or like a video demo, right? Here's one of the cool things that I saw on this particular deep dive, and it gives you kind of a structure of how this basically works. So you have this roadmap, you have ISO development, TC307, and so on. And you can see how this is kind of broken down, right? They have terminology. They have, for instance, WG1 foundations, the identity layer, how it kicks it over to JWG for blockchain distributed ledger technologies and IT techniques. And it specifically mentions a key few things that I'm going to share with you guys here in a moment, which is SG7 interoperability and WG7 interoperability, as well as SG6 governance and so on. Of course, you see some of the security and privacy layers, the use cases, so on and so forth, right? But check this out. And how about this for a moment? WG1 terminology. In summary, based on what you saw in that brief little roadmap outline, WG1 terminology stands for Working Group 1, which will work on identification, currently used national and international standards, guidelines, and other relevant documents, as well as terms and definitions related to ISO TC276 biotechnology. The work of this working group focuses initially on harmonization, where possible, rather than on standardization. Now, you may be wondering about some of these things like harmonization. Basically, in reality, to kind of give you an idea of what that means, standardization means just that. Here's the set standard for instance, compliance and blockchain projects to have certain principles, or hence the term standards, to build on. Harmonization basically means that those standards coming into reality, and if anything, fruition. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as well. Now, another thing I want to show you is basically this and SG7 interoperability. Why does that matter? Well, let's jump into that as well. This comes straight from Gilbert Verdian's PDF he shared a while back. SG7 interoperability defines an interoperability framework by leveraging cloud interoperability standard, which is this particular one, ISO IEC. Like you see right here, there's a lot of numbers. And it, again, like it says, provides a framework to cover these specifically. Governance interoperability, hence why I even introduced this outline at the very beginning to give you a heads up of why this is all tied in, how it makes sense. Business interoperability, technical interoperability. And of course, all of this ties into all sorts of things like policy. If you have interoperability through a particular framework, right, you have to understand that was the whole concept of having the ISO TC307 standard. Those standards create interoperability that allows policies and behavioral mechanisms to happen, and so on, right? Like semantic data flow. Transport facet. The DLT is often thought of operating in an internet-based environment. However, did you know that DLT can operate in other networking environments as well? The transport facet deals with the communications infrastructure, how to get bytes of data from one system to another. And of course, I mean, we could nerd it out all night long when it comes to all this, and I don't want to necessarily do that because I understand for some people this is a lot to take in. But the main thing I wanted to show to you guys is just that there is so much information when it comes to quant and the Overledger and so on. It will absolutely make your head spin because it's just that there's so many standards, and by having standards in place, you will come to the conclusion that this allows just that, the interoperability to happen at scale through all sorts of different industries, whether it is healthcare, whether it is big government, whether it is data, AI, you name it. So I'm going to jump back to just a little bit more of what we have, and I want to show you guys this, and it's a little bit more in regards to WG7, like we talked about earlier, Working Group 7. This dates all the way back to December 2010. This is referenced from the Communication Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council final report in regards to NS/EP Next Generation Working Priority Services. And if anything, I'll try to blow it up a little bit more for you guys. All right. So it says the Let me blow it or shrink it down a little bit smaller. Not gonna blow it up anymore. It says specifically the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, which is a CSRIC, states Working Group 7 was chartered, to determine the requirements for priority communications services as they relate to a pandemic event. Now, why show some of this? Right? You may think, well, the pandemic happened in, 2020 and so on, right? And then, of course, we went out further from there. But, let's face it, with COVID, that's what happened. But this was some of that, for instance, framework communications as a start, even back then. And it mentions specifically, it was chartered to specifically ask WG7 to develop a NG and IP priority service requirement document that specifies the order of magnitude of user types and services covered. Here's some of those examples of those services. And this is why I will put a little bit of emphasis on this. It covered voice, data, video, number of levels of priority processes for authorizing priority access, performance standards, metrics, and expected costs, and to develop a priority services implementation strategy, which types of services should be rolled out first. Now you may be thinking, why is Max even mentioning some of this stuff? The reason why, for the main reason I would mention medical, main reason why I would mention big government, data, AI, all those things, for instance, that we saw earlier in this outline, and especially when it came to Constellation. If you understand that the Quant partnership with DOGE, the reason why it's so key is because of all the various things we just outlined, come to the conclusion that at the same time, if the US government recognizes, for instance, Quant with what they can do with interoperability as far as what they can solve on the scale with the government, right? How about preparing for a pandemic? Like you saw, for instance, and I'm not rooting for this to happen. And I'm not saying that Biden knows, for instance, what's going to happen here soon. But did you remember within, what was it, the last month, I believe, he was on record, on camera, in an interview, saying that we have to prepare for the next pandemic. Well, through Quant's Overledger and some of these standards that they have, it seems as though that they're more than prepared for another pandemic if it should come. So again, what kind of value do we have on some of these particular things? I think there's a lot. All right, let me show you guys just a tad bit more of what we have. And that is this. And the main reason why I want to show you this is because, like it says from Quant Papa, replacing this centralized web. There's a key player here that is sitting next to Gilbert Verdin from another key Quant partnership. So before we jump into who that is, let's go ahead and play this. Here we go.
The best enterprise blockchain team in the world to do this, and this is a mammoth task. I mean, it's not easy to build technology, but we've done it before and at bigger scale as well. So we have the experience to do this, and we're quite excited. So where we're heading, we really like to show this. For the first time, we're able to honor the original vision of the internet with blockchain technology, and that's what we're building. We're building, we're really building the tech to create the internet of trust. And if you look at what is happening, you can actually trust the network for the first time without the need to know and trust each other. And that's the beauty of what blockchain can do using the technology that powers it. And that's what we're excited about. And if you look at what's happening in terms of the network, we're evolving. So the network we have today is what, if you look at this report, it was in 1964. It's kind of a peer-to-peer starfish network. It's evolved from the telecom network, and from there it's become the internet. And from there, where we're heading now is we're at the internet of trust. And this is a distributed ledger network, which is the evolution of the internet. and this is what we're in the middle of building. I mean, our technology is shaping the next evolution and generation of the internet, and that's what's really exciting for us. And in terms of the vision, what we're doing is replacing the centralized web. And if you think about it, it's becoming obsolete. The value that was created with the centralized web is around the application layer. The protocol was quite small and not that much focused on, but now it's the other way around.
All right, welcome back. So why point that out? Well, if anything, there's a big reason for that. This guy, who is Paulo Tasca, who was sitting next to Gilbert Verdi in that particular clip, he's a big player, to say the least. He's a digital economist who specializes in blockchain. He has, of course, experience as a professor and researcher that allowed him to basically serve as an advisor for several central banks. On top of that, companies and startups, associations, and international organizations such as the UN. Did you know that he is entrepreneurial mind and has led to his appointment in many high-ranking decision-making positions, such as the co-chair of the Treasury Management Token Economics Committee over at just that, guys. Yeah, you better believe it. Hedera Hashgraph. So, on top of this, where he's currently at, he is the co-founder and chief strategist of the Quant Network. Also, in the past, I don't have the reference right now, but you can look more into it yourself. He's done some work with Ripple many years ago as well. So, I mean, this guy is got the most impressive resume, and he's working with Quant Network. Very impressive. All right. In closing, why point out all this stuff? Because, if anything, let's face it. Why not point out some of this stuff? The way I look at it is, when it comes to Quant, we get many examples of what they are able to solve through interoperability, but mainly, how about this for size? What they're also able to do through healthcare, through big government, and so on. A lot of times, let's face it, we see videos when it comes to Quant, and it's mainly focused on APIs or some of these other particular things. They allow interoperability for the payment, systems and so on. There's so much more than that. There is so much, way more than just, as the saying goes, they're more than meets the eye. They're literally transforming Web3 as we, or I should say Web2 as we know it, going into Web3. So with that said, guys, glad to share this particular deep dive in regards to Quant and give you a broader perspective of some of the other industries that you may not be aware of, or partnerships with, for instance, Constellation, with DAG, and even Hedera's Hashgraph, right? As we know, ticker symbol HBAR. How cool is that? So, thanks again for watching today's deep dive in regards to Quant and some of the key players such as Constellation and Hashgraph. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you enjoy a live show, check us out every single day at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. On behalf of myself, Larry, and the rest of the CTN Network crew, thanks for watching. And y'all have a blessed day. We'll see you on the next one.